Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, John Haynes, A Conversation with Death. A man who rules the world and the angel of darkness take on a horde of demons in this inaugural John Haynes series adventure. Get John Haynes, A Conversation with Death for 99 cents on Kindle or in paperback today. As the summer of the savage continues to progress, I've been watching a lot of reports on the news talking about gang members participating in violence here in New York. And as I take a critical look at this violence that many of these gang members are participating here in the city, I'm taking a critical look at their behavior, and I'm seeing that people are getting caught up in their emotions regarding the violence these men participate in. But once you take a critical look at these men and their behavior, you'll clearly see that these guys are nothing to be afraid of. Now, when it comes down to many of these gang members, they have an intimidating, hyper-masculine facade. And that's all it is, a facade, because they use that facade of the sagging pants and the clothes and the numbers to make people afraid. However, once you peel back that veneer, you're going to see that many of these so-called gang members are beta males. And they're beta males who are expressing their so-called masculine behaviors using feminine traits. And when you take a critical look at these beta males, you see that the reason why they are expressing themselves this way is because these beta males have grown up with no father to provide these boys with structure or to teach them how to navigate a course in the world. And because there is no father to teach these boys how to socialize and behave in their communities, they learn how to behave just like the women in their communities. Because when it comes down to most of these gang members come from single mother households. And because they have come from a single mother household, they learn how to express their masculinity in feminine ways. Now, one of the things that your gang members participate in that's a feminine behavior is the so-called protecting of turf. However, when you take a critical look at this so-called protecting of turf, this is nothing more than a female's nesting behavior, because when it comes down to females, females like to nest, and they want to have some sort of territory that they nest in where they place their trinkets and a place where they can lay their heads to rest. And that's what your gang members do on their turf. They have this nesting behavior that they learned from their mothers, and they're using that in a hyper masculine way of protecting this so-called turf. And however, when you take a critical look at this so-called turf, many of these men do not own any deeds to that property, and many of these men do not even have their name on their own lease of their own apartment. So when you take a critical look at these beta males we're talking about, they are protecting their turf. These men have no real power because someone else owns the neighborhood that they live in. Moreover, you have many of them, their mothers have the lease in their name. So these men have no real power in their community outside of that intimidating appearance where they are wearing these sagging pants and talking of all this profanity. And it's all an effort to intimidate people into believing that these guys are so-called tough. However, these guys, when you peel back the veneer, are nothing more than cowards. And the way you can tell that many of these so-called gang members are cowards is you have to look at the hierarchy of authority that they follow. Because whenever it comes down to many of these gang members, they do not submit to male authority. In most cases, they submit to female authority. Because again, the female controls the home that this boy lives in, and they control the resources that this boy gets. Everything that this boy gets primarily comes from either his mother or his girlfriend, and that's because of the codependent relationship he has with them. So this so-called gang member who was talking all this tough talk about how he's such a big bad man, when you take a critical look at this gang member, this is a man who has no real power outside of his appearance. And the only reason why he's got that appearance is because, again, he has feminine traits. Because when it comes down to females, they do everything based on their appearance because they want to get the attention of other men. And that's why you participate in this behavior, because this is the behavior he saw modeled for him in that single parent home. So all these guys out here, they're all intimidated by these beta males, but these beta males are nothing to be intimidated by. And now, when it comes down to these gang members, they like to use their appearance and their numbers to intimidate people into joining their group. However, you should never join their group because when it comes down to these beta males are weak on their own and they need their numbers in order to have any sort of power. And the reason why they need to have a gang is because many of these beta males are cowards and they cannot face another man one on one. If I put one of these gang members up against a man who knows how to defend himself, he would get destroyed within about 4 or 5 seconds because a man would size him up in less than 1 second and see how weak this guy is and look at him and assess that he's a weak dude and not be afraid of this beta male. Now, these beta males, what they do is they come in groups in junior high schools and high schools looking to recruit new kids into their gangs. And the reason why they go looking for kids in junior high school and high school is because many of these beta males want to have power over someone else, and they know they can't get power over a grown adult man because when a grown adult man knows how to go out and do for himself. So they look for someone who is weaker than they are so they can indoctrinate that person into their philosophy and be able to manipulate and control that individual. That's why they go after 11, 12, 13-year-old boys because when it comes down to these beta males, these men have serious power issues. They want to have serious control issues. And again, that comes from that feminine way of thinking that they have because when it comes down to these females, they have a way of saying that they want to have this so-called family. And these beta males are copying the same behavior from these single mothers that many of them come from. And what they want to do is indoctrinate your sons into this dysfunctional feminine philosophy and then make them believe that this is a road to manhood. No, this is a false road to manhood. Whenever you see these gang members out here, what they are participating in is a false road to manhood. There is no masculinity in it, there is no masculine behavior in it, and there's no way a boy is going to learn how to be a man in that environment. What that boy is going to learn, again, is how to be effeminate because that's what those gang members are participating in, effeminate behaviors. And you have these guys out here thinking that this is a man when it's not a man at all. And because there is no father in the community to sit down and teach these boys the actual model for manhood and masculinity, many young boys in inner city neighborhoods, they wind up believing that this gang is the road to manhood and that the way to be a man is to, one, be in this gang, and two, go to jail. But that's not the road that a man participates in. And a lot of these guys also believe that the only way to be a man is to participate in any sort of violence. Again, that also goes back to feminine behaviors because the whole concept of the gang comes from a female behavior known as cliques. Because when it comes down to females, they form these groups called social cliques, and these social cliques, what they do is they use their social status to control the community. And that's what your gangs try to do with neighborhoods. The same feminine behavior that these women do in the neighborhood because they see their mothers forming these social cliques where they decide who comes into the community and who goes out of the community and who gets to hang out with certain people. And this is the behavior they see modeled for them. So these boys go out here and participate in the exact same behavior, saying that you get to roll with our set, you get to roll with our crew. And these are feminine behaviors. And they have these boys out here going out here trying to climb social ladders when men do not climb social ladders, because men are leaders, and as a leader, a man goes his own way. A man does not follow the lead of others. And when you have a gang situation, you have a group of followers, and you have this group of followers going out here forming this social clique, and then they're going to protect their little nest. And what happens in that situation is these men wind up destroying themselves because there's no place to go. And the reason why there's no place to go is because in most cases, females don't have any place to go. Because when it comes down to many females, once they have formed their nest, they become comfortable, they become stagnant, and then they have all this energy, and that's why you see them going back and forth with each other and having these little beefs and arguments with each other across the way from each other. And the boys model that exact same behavior. However, they escalate things by having their guns and their weapons, and then they go back and forth with each other in these so-called turf wars. And that's, again, feminine behavior, because these men have not been taught life skills by their father, the masculine life skills that will enable them to grow, the masculine life skills that will enable them to learn how to build, the masculine life skills that will enable them to get outside of the neighborhood and go out here and be their own man. No, they didn't get those skills from their father, because in many cases their mother drove that man off, or they got involved with a garbage tier man who wasn't worth anything and could not teach them anything, because he learned feminine life skills from his mother and had no father in his life. Now, when it comes down to these gangs, these are guys who are, again, they use their numbers and their intimidation to control people, and then they use their weapons to enforce the behaviors in their communities. And they use their intimidation and their weapons to control people because they don't want anyone leaving the nest. Because when it comes down to your gang members, they terrorize people not because they want to protect their so-called turf. They terrorize the neighborhood because they want to keep people locked in that turf so that they can control them and extract resources from them. Because when it comes down to the gang has no real power. The gang needs people to control. This is where the codependency comes from, because this is the codependent behavior this gang member learned from his single mother, because his single mother attached an emotional hose to him in order to extract welfare benefits out of him and food stamps out of him and Section 8 out of him. And now he participates in the same behavior by going out here terrorizing the people in his community in the hopes of extracting resources out of them. This is why you will see your gang members standing outside of that Arab-owned store from 7 o'clock in the morning all the way until midnight, because this is how these guys extract resources out of people. This is why your gang members sell drugs in your community, because these men do not know how to build businesses, they do not know how to build an economic structure, and they don't know how to do anything, because these are skills that only a man can teach. So they participate in these feminine behaviors, believing that this is going to make them a man, and then they always wind up hitting a wall because they run into law enforcement, which is primarily white men, who impose real male authority on them. And that's when we see how weak many gang members are, because what happens is they run into a white male authority figure, and that's when you start to see the gang member starting to become extremely submissive, because these guys, they know when they run into actual male authority that they have no real power. And that's why you see these guys crumbling into dust and going into tears and histrionics when they run into a real man. When they run into real men, that's when the hypermasculine's facade falls, and that's when these guys fall completely apart. Now, when it comes down to these gangs, these gang members, these are men who have been programmed with a set of beliefs and a set of ideas, and they don't know that they're following a false sense of ideas and a false road to manhood. Because again, they do not have a man in their lives to teach them manhood. They do not have a man to teach them masculinity, and they don't have a man to teach them about the concept of male authority. And the reason why they don't have those concepts, again, is because there's no father in the home, and because they have not learned these concepts from a father. What they do is they terrorize their own communities instead of going out of their way to protect their communities. Because men who have fathers in their lives, they understand that their role in the community is to be a leader who leads and sets a direction for his community, someone who sets a tone for his community, someone who establishes standards for his community, and establishes a quality of life for all the people in their community. And as the leader, they set a direction where everybody follows their lead. And as a man, these men know that they follow their own lead and they set their own course. Because a man can go out and do for himself, whereas your gang member can't do anything without somebody telling him what to do. That's the difference between an alpha male and a beta male. An alpha male is a man who can go out and do for himself, a man who can go out and be on his own, and a man who does not need other people to go out here and do things. And because he's out here doing for himself, people respect him and people want to follow his lead. Whereas a beta male is a completely submissive male, someone who can be easily cowed, someone who submits to others, and someone who follows another man's philosophy and does not follow his own philosophy or follow the structure of God's natural order. No, when it comes down to these beta males, the gang is their God, and that's why they are completely lost without their gang leadership. This is also due to them being manipulated as children into believing these lies, because again, a man who has a father in the home is going to know that he has to go out and do on his own, and he has to do for himself. Moreover, when you have a man knows how to build, and a man understands he has to work with others in order to build structures in his community, like businesses, like infrastructure, and in order to form relationships with others inside and out of the community in order to make sure that there's an economy growing in that community. Your gang members, since they are a beta, do not know how to build. And like females, they tear down their communities when they are left alone. Because that's why many neighborhoods that are run by gangs literally fall completely apart. Because again, these men have feminine life skills, and because they have feminine life skills, what they do is they engage in these petty beefs and these petty wars with each other, shooting and killing innocent people in the crossfire of their fights and their little arguments with each other over women, over pairs of shoes, over looks, and they do damage to the overall economy of their communities. And when they participate in this gang violence, what it does is it drives people who would care about that community out of that community, and it drives resources out of the community and people who would be willing to help build the community out of the community. And that's why those neighborhoods look like wastelands, because there's no way anyone can invest in that community, because these gang members, everywhere they go, they tear their communities down. These people have no understanding of how to build, because again, they have no father in the community, they have no men in the community, and in order to build a community, you need men in the community in order to build it. I mean, when you have beta males, they don't know how to build. They only know how to tear it down, and they only know how to get their needs met through government programs. And they can't get government programs because they're male, and that's why we have all this dysfunction in the communities where you have these brainwashed gang members. Because again, these guys are completely brainwashed. They bought into a series of philosophies created by the government, and Madison Avenue and Hollywood, but they think that they're being men, but they're actually learning feminine behaviors that women participate in. Because when it comes down to the gang, they were something created by the CIA in order to destroy black people, but many black people will talk about how these are real men. No, these are not real men. These are soldiers who are supporting white supremacy, and these are guys who are out here participating in white supremacist behaviors. Because when you take another critical look at your gang member, they participate in the exact same behaviors as your Ku Klux Klansmen. And your Ku Klux Klan, their ultimate goal was to keep the community dependent on the white people who are in charge of it and keep them enslaved so that they could continue to extract resources from those people and keep them in a state of poverty so that those white people could have a sense of superiority over all those poor black people. That's what the gang does for white supremacy. It keeps black people at the bottom and keeps them from thinking about growing to go outside of it. Because most of the people your gang members usually try to target for murder these days are your kids out here who are doing well in school, the kids who are trying to get A's on their papers, the kids who are out here trying to go to college. And the reason why the gangs don't want those people to go out of the community is because, again, they want to control the community, they want to extract resources out of the community, and they want to make sure that everyone continues to submit to white supremacy and stay in their little place in the world so that they don't bother the white people outside of it. When it comes down to the gang, they are white supremacy's enforcers, and they do white supremacy's job in making sure that black people don't come out of their communities to compete with white people economically and continue to try to challenge any sort of white person overall. That's why the gangs out here are dangerous, because they are black people who have been programmed to do white supremacy's job, and that's why they are the chocolate Klansmen, because they don't need to get the Ku Klux Klan to do their job. They find several of these brainwashed Negroes and send them to do the dirty work for them. And that's why your gangs are dangerous, because you have these beta males who are effeminate, participating in feminine behaviors, believing that they are masculine, terrorizing communities, and destroying the best and brightest people in those communities, and destroying their communities overall. They do the work of a white supremacist so that the white supremacist doesn't have to soil their hands, and with them doing their dirty work, there is no threat of a black economy rising or black people becoming leaders in their own community. When you have a gang infestation, the only solution to a gang infestation is for mothers to go out here and put these boys out of their homes. However, many people know that many of these mothers are either supporting the gang because the gang is giving her money, or many of these mothers are so emotionally attached to these boys they can't think that this boy can do any sort of wrong. So they know that because of the codependent relationship the mother has with her son, that there is no real solution that's going to be solved, because these women, again, don't have the discipline, character, or resolve of a man, because a man is going to end that problem by putting that boy out of his house. Because if they'll say this, the man will say, look, if this boy is man enough to go out here and hang out with hoodlums and criminals and think that this is his way to go get his own, he does not need my resources. So he will put that boy out of his house who's a part of a gang, because he's going to say that if I have a home and I have a standard, I do not have gangs as my standard. As the leader who is paying the bills and the authority figure who imposes the rules of this home, if this boy does not want to follow the rules of my home, he is going to leave my home. And as a collective community of men, they're going to put those so-called gang members out of their community, because they have a standard for their community and a standard for the quality of life in their community. And because they want to have a high quality of life, those fathers are going to put those men out of their community and let them go out on their own. And as those guys find out the hard way about life, they then want to return to the home, and then they learn that they have to submit to male authority. And if they want to go anywhere with male authority, they have to follow the direction of male leadership. That's what usually happens when there are fathers in the community. These boys learn that in order to do things, they need the help of an adult man, because only a man can teach another man how to be a man. When boys come together and try to come up with their own ideas about masculinity, this is how we wind up with these gangs, and these gangs primarily are participating in feminine behavior. Yes, they look intimidating on the outside, but most people have to understand that these guys are complete cowards on the inside. Because I see so many kids, they're so scared of these gang members and so scared of their numbers, but they are nothing to be scared of. You have to learn how to be a man, and part of being a man is standing up for what you believe in and standing up for yourself. Because at the end of the day, if you are a man, you have to understand you are out here on your own. You have to learn how to do for yourself, and you have to learn how to do by yourself, because the only person at the end of the day who is going to take care of your own needs is you, and the only person who's going to look out for you is you. So when you listen to these so-called gang members tell you these lies about how they're going to look out for you, no, they're not going to look out for you, because in most cases these guys flip each other when they're in a police interrogation room, and they flip everyone around them because they're primarily cowards. A man has to learn how to do for self, he has to learn how to stand up for self, and he has to learn how to go out for himself. And a man has to learn how to go out here by himself, because again, he is the only one who will meet his own needs. He is the only one who will care for himself, and he's the only one who will be able to take care of his own community. And men learn how to do things on their own, and that's something that every man out here has to learn how to do. Gangs are a group of cowards who are too scared to go out and do for self. Gangs are too scared to go out and do on their own. And they believe using group and intimidation numbers are going to help get them an advantage. But at the end of the day, whenever these beta males run into true males, that's when these guys fall apart. And that's when everything that they try to use force and intimidation winds up getting taken away from them. No man needs to be a part of a gang. A true man can go out here and be a man on his own, and a true man can stand up on his own by standing up for his core values, standing up for his core principles, and having the discipline and character to be the man he wants to be, and set his own terms for manhood, and set his own tone for manhood, because that's what a man does. Because a man knows how to do for himself, he knows how to stand on his own 2 feet, and he knows how to stand up for what he believes in, because he knows that the principles of manhood come from God, and the principles of manhood are something that he stands for on his own, and can stand on his own without the help of anybody else. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of my SJS Direct Men's Issues books, like the Simp series, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.